ピーター、このエディって主人公どう思う？
そうですね。なんかね、自分にすごく感じが似ていてね。なんていうんですか、小さい時に父親が別れたとことか、意外ともう、自分の生活に、性格も意外と似てるような感じ
で。ベッドでタバコを吸わないで、私を好きなら火を消して。
Funeral Parade of Roses is a challenging film to summarize succinctly. A staple of the Japanese New Wave, it has many shifting identities, from an acid-fueled synesthetic montage to an introspective documentary that questions the fictional nature of itself. Sandwiched between these two extremes is a story about the underground queer subculture of Tokyo in the late 60s. This directorial debut from Toshio Matsumoto is one of the first films to spotlight transgender identity, but by extension, it expresses the essence of all identities, calling into question the very notion of the self. With such a complex subject matter, Funeral Parade of Roses chooses a cinematic language that is purposefully obscure and up to interpretation. It's a film that demands to be seen in its entirety and has no issues going into gritty detail. It's an overload to the senses that's only dulled by an attempt to describe it. So, why do I want to talk about it?
There really aren't a lot of films I would say that I personally relate to. Even though it was made at a time before the distinction between trans, gay, and drag queen weren't really fully developed, I think it does a much better job at expressing the LGBTQ experience than even some modern queer films do. So tonight, I want to study its techniques and develop an understanding of just how this film communicates, so that we can further inform the telling of our own stories.
そうなのよ。
映画に関するすべての基地の、そして最終的な定義は拭い去られた。もはや一切の扉は開け放たれている。メナス・ジョガス。ジョナス・メガス。あ、そうか。
The title alone, Bara no Soretsu in Japanese, reveals a lot of the film's context. While bara is the Japanese word for rose, it is also a somewhat pejorative term for effeminate or gay men, similar to pansy or sissy. Not only does the title have a double meaning, but it also foreshadows the use of roses as an allegory for queerness. Now, it would be impossible to discuss this film without mentioning the main character/actor. Eddie is a trans woman who works as a hostess in a Tokyo gay bar. While she's very popular with the clientele, she has a bitter rivalry with the lead hostess, Leda. Eddie is played by popular gay entertainer and drag queen Shinotsuke Ikehata, who adopted the stage name Peter, or Pita. Peter was famous for playing both male and female roles in movies, most notably his portrayal of Kyoami in Kurosawa's Ran from 1985. Many parallels are drawn between actor and character, and this is done in a way that few films have attempted since. The French critic Alexandre Astruc proposed the coming age of the caméra stylo, or camera pen, a style of cinema that would gradually break free from the tyranny of what is visual, from the image for its own sake, from the immediate and concrete demands of the narrative, to become a means of writing just as flexible and subtle as written language. In short, he imagined an age where film would focus less on narrative constraints and more on expressing ideas through more direct means. In line with this philosophy, there are several documentary-style interviews with the cast scattered throughout Funeral Parade of Roses. The story has a subplot where Eddie is helping some friends make a documentary about student protests and underground life in Tokyo. The framing suggests that this is the in-universe film crew interviewing the in-universe subjects, but it's obvious that they're talking about the production of Funeral Parade of Roses. In no other segment is this clearer than in Peter's. His interview alone could be a summary for the film's thesis. He expresses his personal relation to Eddie, but also the ways he sees himself differently. His portrayal of the character, though it may just be good acting, is informed by his own experiences, and thus it is difficult to conceive of Eddie without Peter, or Peter without Eddie. This is an extension of Astruc's camera pen, allowing Peter to not only speak his mind in the film, but tell his life story through Eddie. On the surface, some would read Funeral Parade of Roses as a sexploitation film with its numerous intercourse and strip dancing scenes. But I think it's the personal experiences of the queer cast shining through that make it something deeper. I really like this quote from the British Film Institute article on Funeral Parade of Roses. As Eddie's grip on sanity begins to loosen, Matsumoto's camera spends more and more time joined to her hip, and the sense of psychological interiority is only bolstered by the expressive, avant-garde editing style. This is perhaps the film's most radical and forward-thinking choice. Eddie is not treated purely as a spectacle, an exotic other to be gawped at. Instead, we are invited inside her head, her memories, and her trauma. Another layer being pulled back is that of Matsumoto himself and the character Guevara. Guevara is named after Cuban revolutionary Che Guevara. But like the title, his name also contains a pun, with Guevara pronounced in Japanese sounding like the phrase gay bada, or gay rose, or gay, I guess. As the creator of the documentary within the film, he serves as a voice for the director within the story. His presence on screen is authoritative and given extra attention. When he's not spouting literary quotes that coincidentally tie into the film's central thesis, you can find him posing nude in fast-paced montages. He's an artist, just let him do it. Through this character, Matsumoto is communicating his power as a director. He is the commander of what is and is not shown. With an action that almost stereotypically depicts a director visualizing and composing his shot, he is essentially saying, I am the director, this is my camera pen, and this is what I have chosen to show you. And with his camera pen, Matsumoto communicates in a way that is unmistakable and blunt, especially for a movie. If he wants you to hear what a person thinks or what they believe, then he'll have them tell you directly. If he wants to bring you into the mind and self-image of a character, he will purposefully disrupt the narrative, cutting in a few frames that visually represent their headspace. Matsumoto sees the message of his film as being far more important than its plot, thus dividing the story into a non-linear mosaic of images that serve said purpose. Completely unconventional and almost counterintuitive to the goals of traditional cinema, but incredibly effective at communicating his ideas.
わかんないちょっとねでも私好きだからねゲイが好きだから
ゲイボーイが好きだった。
はい
どうして好きになったの？
生まれつきですね
生まれつき。
はい
Many LGBTQ people who come to this film may find instances of relatability. The struggle to pass as the desired gender identity is almost universal in the trans experience. One scene that sticks out to me is Eddie's flashback to her gender awakening. Young Eddie watches his mother's beauty salon through a cracked door with a gaze that we call in today's parlance gender envy. In an attempt to emulate a gender expression he feels so far from, he begins applying his mother's lipstick as tears well up in his eyes, punctuating this first push into self-love with a mirror kiss. This is the moment Eddie became who she is today. Going beyond simply showing instances of trans life, this scene illustrates it, articulating the experience through unmistakable and poignantly visual means. On a darker note, queer viewers may also relate to the graver struggles of some characters. Catcalling from strangers, unwanted advantage, dissociative states, and constantly having to hear people decry your very existence in public. This shot shows a march of right-wing protesters that were common in mid-century Japan. I can't really pin down what their beliefs are, other than that their inclusion in the film suggests that they're deeply homophobic. Eddie is seen in the background, dwarfed by their overbearing presence. Whether this was a real demonstration or a fabrication for the movie, with the intercut title flashing on screen, the message is clear. This is a funeral parade of roses, a death march on the Japanese gay subculture. A cultural clash between old and new Japan is also apparent in Eddie's rivalry with Leda. Their conflict is both romantic and professional, as they fight for the attention of the same man in the same position at the gay bar. Leda and Eddie can be interpreted as a struggle between tradition and modernity, respectively. Almost always in an ornate kimono, Leda's mannerisms and the set dressing in her room align her very closely with traditional Japanese culture. Leda happily falls into an antiquated female gender role, especially when she shares a space with her lover. She's also shot in a way that mimics the strict stationary camera of Ozu Yasujiro films, which are also set in the clash between tradition and modernity. On the other hand, Eddie's fashion sense and hair is always changing. Her long false lashes and thick eyeliner are contemporary for the time, and she spends most nights dancing at the club and getting stoned to psychedelic rock with her hippie entourage.
Which reminds me, if you actually plan on watching this film, it's always better with the help of some entertainment-enhancing substances. Yeah, drop acid and watch this movie.
In contrast to Leda's scenes, Eddie's are much more chaotic in movement and editing, similar in style to the French New Wave. This isn't just to demonstrate her drug-fueled daily exploits, as it also emphasizes the disruption of her surroundings and the gender norms within. She doesn't care about playing an idealistic female role in society, unlike Leda. She's there to challenge the very notion of gender and how one should align themselves with it. Nothing communicates their differences better than when Leda and Eddie are discussing fake gays with some clubgoers.
もう結構カッコバッグもいいじゃない。
なんだよそのカッコバッグって。
カッコだけで本当のホモじゃないのよ。
そうか。その方が金になるってわけだな。
あら変な目で見ないで。私たちは正真正銘の本物ですからね。
Fundamentally, Leda has a rigid understanding of LGBTQ identity. In her mind, there is a right and a wrong way to be gay. Eddie disagrees, stating that all forms of queerness, be they temporary or constantly shifting, are authentic. Leda's kind of the gatekeep to Eddie's girl boss, if you get what I'm saying. I myself agree more with Eddie's stance, as I don't necessarily believe there's a single correct way to be anything, let alone being gay, and I think that's the point of the film. Daily, we tread the paradoxical tightrope between fitting in and standing out. So much value is placed on our social status that it can be freeing to take a look through the eyes of someone who doesn't live by those constraints. Apart from the characters, Funeral Parade of Roses demonstrates the tension between old and new through its ever-shifting forms of storytelling. Interspersed within the boundary-pushing techniques that have come to characterize the international New Wave film movement are short vignettes that conversely relate to Japan's artistic roots. When Leda has a bitter argument with her lover, it quickly escalates to a physical altercation. The music suddenly changes to shamisen playing and vocalization, with dialogue now displayed through intertitles. A stark shift in tone, the combined diegetic elements lend themselves to the audience-addressing characteristics of traditional Japanese theater, no doubt accenting the domestic drama on screen. Another similar instance happens when Eddie and her girlfriends encounter a group of cisgendered women on the streets. After exchanging insults, the opposing women cartoonishly strike a pose similar to a mie. A mie is a pose used in kabuki plays that conveys a character's personality and motivations. Performers employ very specific and intricate movements of the body, head, and eyes in order to get this across. These poses can be very complex and dynamic, with actors spending lengthy rehearsals perfecting them. What we see here in Funeral Parade of Roses is an amateurish take, sure, but I admire the references making in how it embellishes the story. Silent film-esque hilarity ensues, and wigs get hella snatched. I find it sort of beautiful that a progressive film that's combative towards the society it was made in still makes the effort to connect with that society's cultural history. It uses aspects of an older visual language to communicate newer ideas, and I love it. Another equally important theme in Funeral Parade of Roses is that of identity and selfhood. This is illustrated by the constant recurring motif of mirrors in the film. This imagery could be read through a queer lens, representing the pertinent need in some transgender lives to check for if they pass. There are also many instances where we don't know we're watching a reflection until the camera moves, changing the framing of the scene. This particular shot of Leda reveals a lot about her character, excluding all elements of the previous shot besides her and her reflection. The text overlay suggests the elegant and regal way she views herself. Kagami yo kagami, kono yo de ichiban, utsukushii hito wa dare? This is a peek into her private world, her headspace, only broken when Eddie comes crashing in from reality in a bitterly ironic answer to her own question. If you plan on watching this movie, pay close attention to these scenes. Ask yourself, what does the character see in their reflection? Does it change or affirm who they believe they are? And what does it mean when someone appears with them? Another instance comes when Guevara is gluing his fake beard on as his editor cuts his film. Wait a second, was he wearing a fake beard the whole time? This causes him to sneeze, flashing a headshot of himself beardless for a few frames. A similar thing happens later in the film, with Eddie putting on a wig being juxtaposed with Guevara sneezing his fake beard off again. This guy just can't get a break. The cut in this context visually links fake hair and wigs with gender perception. This is why I say Funeral Parade of Roses doesn't just express trans identity. It universalizes this experience of self-scrutiny by showing one of the explicitly non-trans characters adjusting his gender expression to fit a more masculine image. And with such a rigid social definition of gender roles, everyone struggles to pass, to keep up a certain image and be accepted for who they want to be seen as. Serving as a counter-narrative in the film to the mirror motif is that of the mask. Sorry, wrong movie. While masks are only explicitly mentioned in one scene, its themes of hiding true identity permeate throughout the entire movie. After witnessing the protesters and running into some rather nasty characters, Eddie retreats into an art museum where the overall mood and look of the scene gets turned on its head. With these phrases echoing in her head, she scans over the art before her. Grotesque, unrecognizable faces that look more like fleshy amalgamations in agonizing torment than anything even resembling anthropomorphism. It's almost like a funhouse version of the mirrors we see in other scenes. It shows how confrontational and discomforting introspection can feel for anyone. Again, not just for LGBTQ individuals. Feeling like you're not really who you say you are is scary. The punctuation of the scene with shadowy figures resonates with a sense of jamais vu, a stark example of the cross-section between dissociation and derealization. Similarly bleak existential notions are brought up when other characters have their masks peeled back. In the aforementioned interview scenes, characters, or the actors in this case, express a very cynical yet introspective view of themselves. To go even further, some characters speak through their masks, filtering their vulnerability through an expressionless demeanor. They sound pessimistic, even apocalyptic. Guevara, the endless spouter of philosophy, has this to say.
Guevara. 何考えてんのさ。
出口のことさ。
出口?
His message is made clear by another title overlay. The world is coming to an end. No doubt a feeling informed by their experiences, searching the world for a place in it and finding nothing. For Eddie, this manifests in a sinking graveyard after the death of a close friend, though her position is somehow even more nihilistic.
そのうち日本中全部海の底へ沈んじゃえばいいのよ。
As an expansion of this theme, the film itself has several masks that are constantly being taken off, put on, and swapped out. Besides the ever-changing genre and tone, Funeral Parade of Roses likes to turn in on itself, scrutinizing its own premise. One of the most jarring instances of this literally features famous film critic Choji Yodogawa interrupting the climax to comment on what we've just seen.
怖かったですね。なんていうことでしょう。この呪われた人間の運命、しかも残酷の中に笑いまで込めた本当の異色作品でしたね。
So yeah, the film kinda analyzes itself. Don't really know what I'm doing here anymore, just... As much as Funeral Parade of Roses likes to speak to its audience, the drama and emotional effect of the film is never abandoned. Despite characters looking the audience through the friggin' windows of their soul, it never feels like the blatant disregard for the fourth wall is an attempt to distance itself from itself. As silly as it seems, this is not ironic humor. Rather, Funeral Parade of Roses taking off its mask in this way compounds the narrative being spun in the plot. It alludes to the real drama we face daily in trying to figure out just what we are. This act, no pun intended, mirrors the state of dissociation and emotional withdrawal that characters like Eddie experience throughout its runtime. In the same way she asks herself, "Who am I?" the film poses you the same question. In your eyes, am I a mirror or a mask?
So, this last chapter isn't necessarily about film analysis as much as it's just what I took away personally from this movie. You know, I only first saw it about a month ago, and it's already one of my favorites.
In my still very early studies of the Japanese language, I've encountered a lot of the ways the vocabulary can be gendered. Much like English, there are gendered pronouns, but they're mostly in first person rather than in the third. For instance, there are masculine words for I and me, like boku and ore, feminine ones like atashi and atai, and gender-neutral ones like watashi and ware. With this in mind, we can see how Eddie distinguishes herself as a female in Japanese, using to refer to herself, despite culturally still being considered, at least biologically, a boy. Gendered language works differently in every culture, and I just found it so cool to see how queer people in Japan also have preferred pronouns, despite them working differently from English ones. It wasn't just her speech that made me connect with Eddie. Watching her just be herself, living freely outside the constrictions of her world is a breath of fresh air. It's so liberating to see a 50-year-old movie give a character this kind of representation. Watching Eddie, I relive a lot of very happy moments in my life. I recall spaces where I was able to express myself any way I wanted. But there was one scene that really struck me when I first saw it. I can't show much of it, but to me, it's one of the most emotional scenes in an already heavy film. Eddie, Guevara, and their friends meet up together in a private room. After a couple puffs of a, substance, they spontaneously erupt into a dance frenzy. The sequence is full of extended shots showing bare bodies moving to the rhythms of a psychedelic rock song that would make Jimi Hendrix blush. As the party winds down and people fall into the embrace of each other's arms, this intertitle appears on screen. It reads, "Oh, the Empire of Roses." I don't think anything else in this film, with its dark undertones and blood-soaked ending, shines with more hope and optimism than this phrase. If you're at all a part of the LGBTQ community, or even an ally, then you might understand where I'm coming from with this.
Just for a second, I want you to take a step back and look at your life. Look at the friends that you've made, the ones you trust. Look at the communities we've all built, the change we've fostered in the world, as microscopic as it might be against the massive attacks made in our very existence. Against all odds, we found a place to be happy.
This is our Empire of Roses. An invisible nation whose patriotism comes out in very small pockets of society, but one kept alive by unbroken promises to live as our most authentic selves. In a political climate where the narrative surrounding gay and trans people is being appropriated and taken from us, it becomes more and more important with each passing day that our voices aren't drowned out. Besides the very limited ways we can demonstrate our solidarity, above all else, we need to be visible. To take back the narrative and show the world who we really are.
Look, I don't care what you think about me, or trans identity, or any of this for that matter. Regardless of your beliefs, though, you cannot deny the inherent existential problem of finding yourself. Because in the end, that's what we're all struggling to do. And I think Funeral Parade of Roses communicates that beautifully. And if we can only learn how to tell our stories in that same way from this film, I think we'll be able to open the door for wider acceptance in this world. So, this Pride Month, do me a favor. Just be who you really are. Because even though you may still be in the middle of figuring out what that actually means, no one can take away your ability to love yourself.
この役やろうと思ったらどういうところでやるの？
まだ映画ということが初めてだから、まず興味本位ということと、それと、その自分の環境に似ているということと、ゲイボーイをもすごくなんか綺麗に描いてくれるっていうことですね。
瞳を閉じて
I don't really have a script for this, so I'm just gonna talk. This video was supposed to come out during Pride Month, but I don't know if you could see here, I fractured my...
Next time, stick to a script, Christy. Anyways, correction, I almost fractured my left hand, which slowed down editing considerably. Added with the fact that I've been a bit sick and energy drained with unnamed illness, this video was probably not going to be finished by Pride Month.
Would it be the first time a video almost killed me?
So I had to re-edit this video several times to get around the copyright strike, but that's a story for another day! So I hope to stay motivated to make more videos. Which, by the way, the next one will be out sooner. I promise. Please don't get mad at me. So hit me with a subscribe, give me a like, and watch some of my other videos while you're at it. If you like this, you'll probably enjoy my Lost Thrift Store Media video, so click right here to check that out. And with that being said, I hope to see you all next time. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave her there like that.
I heard her.